In 2025, something happened to American tourism that had not happened in 2 decades outside of the pandemic. International visitors stopped coming. Not all of them, not overnight, but enough of them that the drop showed up in the numbers fast. Roughly 5.5% fewer international visitors came to the United States in 2025 compared to the year before. That does not sound like much until you realize that, across the rest of the world, tourism was setting records. Everywhere else, more people were traveling than ever. In America, fewer people were showing up. Then, in the summer of 2026, the World Cup arrived. And for a lot of people in the travel industry, it looked less like a football tournament and more like a lifeline. This is the story of how American tourism nearly collapsed, why it happened, and whether one massive global event was really enough to turn it around. The decline did not start with a single headline. It built slowly, month over month, through 2025. Visitors from Western Europe pulled back first. Then Canada, which had always sent some of the largest numbers of travelers across the border, saw its numbers fall even harder, with some months showing drops of more than 20%. Land crossings from Canada, in particular, collapsed. Fewer road trips, fewer weekend visits, fewer family trips south for the winter. By the end of the year, the country had lost more than $8 billion in visitor spending it would otherwise have collected. Hotels in border cities felt it first. Restaurants near major attractions felt it next. And in states that depend heavily on winter tourists escaping the cold, business owners were left waiting for customers who simply were not showing up anymore. The reasons behind the drop were not really about the destination itself. America's landmarks had not changed. Its cities had not changed. What changed was how the rest of the world felt about visiting. Surveys from the period found that a large share of international travelers said they had become less likely to visit the United States. Tighter border screening, stricter visa rules, and a run of stories about travelers being stopped or detained at entry points made plenty of would-be visitors nervous, even ones with all the right paperwork. On top of that, a strong US dollar made everything more expensive for foreign visitors the moment they converted their money. A hotel room that felt reasonable to an American traveler could feel painfully expensive to someone converting from euros or pounds. And funding cuts to the country's own tourism marketing arm meant fewer international campaigns encouraging people to visit in the first place. Put all of that together, and you get a simple, uncomfortable picture. It was not that people had lost interest in America. It was that showing up had started to feel harder, more expensive, and less welcoming than it used to. For an industry built on hospitality, this kind of decline is not just a bad quarter. It touches everything downstream. Fewer international visitors means fewer nights booked in hotels, fewer meals bought in restaurants, fewer souvenirs, tours, and rental cars. Theme parks that depend on visitors from overseas started reporting softer numbers. Some cities, especially those close to the Canadian border, felt the drop most sharply, with hotel occupancy sliding well behind prior years. And this was happening while the rest of the global travel industry was thriving. Europe was pulling in record numbers. Asia was recovering strong. America, for the first time in a long time, was the exception, not the example. Then came the World Cup. Originally awarded years earlier, the tournament had always been expected to bring a wave of visitors into the country. But by the time it actually arrived in the summer of 2026, it was carrying a lot more weight than a normal sporting event. It was arriving right as the country needed a reason for the world to look at America differently again. Forecasts going into the tournament suggested international arrivals could climb by close to 4% for the year, with a meaningful share of that increase tied directly to the World Cup itself. After a year of decline, even a modest rebound felt significant. Quick pause. If you're finding this useful, go ahead and hit subscribe, because we're breaking down exactly how the World Cup is reshaping US tourism, city by city, all summer long. And drop a comment. Did you know tourism to the US had actually been dropping before this tournament even started? Let's get back into it. The scale of the tournament itself is hard to overstate. 48 teams, more than 100 matches, 16 host cities spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Roughly 6.5 million total attendees, with more than 1 million of those coming from outside the country specifically for the World Cup. Economists projected the tournament could add somewhere around $5 billion in direct tourism spending in the United States alone, spread across hotels, restaurants, transportation, and retail. Add in broadcasting, sponsorships, and related spending, and some estimates put the total economic impact across North America near $9 billion over the 6-week window. International visitors, on average, were expected to spend far more per day than domestic travelers, often staying for a week and a half or longer and attending multiple matches during their trip. For a tourism industry that had spent the past year watching visitor numbers shrink, this was the kind of spending injection it had been waiting for. Here is where the story gets more complicated. The boost from the World Cup did not land evenly across the country. Cities like Houston and Dallas saw strong gains in bookings heading into the tournament. Miami, with its deep ties to fan bases across Latin America, saw a real surge in demand. But other host cities, including some in the Pacific Northwest, saw softer numbers than expected. And in a notable twist, a large share of hotels across host cities reported bookings falling short of their original projections, even as ticket sales for the tournament itself remained strong. Part of that gap came down to the same forces that caused the original decline. Visa backlogs, travel cost concerns, and lingering hesitation from some international travelers meant that not every fan who wanted to attend made it across the border. The tournament helped. It did not erase every barrier that had built up over the previous years. Even in cities where hotel bookings underperformed, the tournament created activity in less obvious corners of the economy. Short-term rental platforms reported a sharp jump in searches across host cities, with tens of thousands of new listings appearing in the months leading into the tournament. Airlines added extra capacity on routes connecting host cities, anticipating fans hopping between matches in different parts of the country. Restaurants and sports bars, especially near stadiums, expected a strong lift regardless of how hotel bookings performed, driven by watch parties, matchday crowds, and fans grabbing food between games. Executives in the restaurant and hospitality industry were cautious early in the tournament, pointing out that spending tends to climb once a country's fan base gets emotionally invested deep into the knockout rounds. In other words, the real financial boost was expected to build as the tournament went on, not all at once at kickoff. So did the World Cup save U.S. tourism from collapsing? The honest answer is more nuanced than a headline can capture. It clearly helped. It reversed a full year of decline into what looks like modest growth for 2026, and it injected billions of dollars into host cities at a moment the industry badly needed it. Places with strong existing tourism infrastructure and cultural ties to international fan bases saw real, measurable gains. But it did not undo every problem that caused the original drop. Visa backlogs did not disappear. The stronger dollar did not get cheaper. And some of the hesitation. For the ones who did make the trip, plenty describe a kind of relief once they landed. The border crossing that worried them for months turned out to be routine. The city that felt uncertain from a distance turned out to be loud, welcoming, and full of energy in person. Multiply that experience across more than 1 million visitors, and you start to see how a single tournament can shift not just spending numbers, but the story fans carry home with them. What this story really shows is how fragile an industry tourism can be, and how much it depends on more than just having great things to see. A country can have the best stadiums, the best cities, and the most famous landmarks in the world, and still lose visitors if people do not feel welcome, or if the cost and hassle of showing up outweighs the appeal of the trip. The World Cup proved that a big enough moment can pull people back in, even when the underlying conditions have not fully changed. The question now is whether that lesson sticks, long after the final whistle blows in New Jersey and the crowds go home. That's the story of how one tournament pulled American tourism back from the edge, at least for now. If you learned something from this, smash that like button. It really helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you're new, because we're tracking what happens to U.S. tourism after the World Cup ends, and that story is just getting started. Drop a comment and let me know, do you think this bump lasts, or does it fade once the tournament is over? And check out the video on your screen right now, because you're going to want to see that one too. See you in the next one.